Before we get into it there, we just want to remind people that we're supported through Danny Donovan at quickminutes.com.
Yeah, Danny's a very good friend of both myself and James. He comes from the north side as well, and he grew up locally, and he's been a massive supporter of the podcast and both myself and James since we actually began. And he has his own company called Quick Minutes now, and
quickminutes.com is a meeting management application for semi-formal and formal meetings. And look, if you want to know more about that, quickminutes.com, and supporting Danny's supporting us. So if you're interested in that, check them out and enjoy the rest of the podcast. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Norries podcast. I'm your host James, and I'm joined as always by my good friend Timmy Long.
Hey everyone.
In the hot seat this week is Keith Walsh, writer and broadcaster. How's the form, Keith?
Good man. This is a real honour to be on with the two Norries. Yeah, two legends. Thanks very much for asking me.
No, great to have you here.
Thanks for being here, Keith.
For the people that don't know you, right? And a lot of people will listen to you and they'll know you because you're in the media. But will we go right back to where you're from, where you grew up and what it was like?
Born in a place called Edgeworthstown outside, well, close to Lanesborough, where I lived there for 4 years, and then moved into the real Midlands, into Athlone. A place called
Heart of the country.
Yeah. A place called Willow Park. The most exciting thing about Athlone was like there was a stone there somewhere that was like the exact middle of Athlone, which we used to kind of, as young lads, you'd visit every now and then. You go, I'm in the middle of Ireland. This is amazing. This is a stone that's the middle of Ireland. And then I found out a few years later it wasn't at all. But grew up in Athlone, late 70s, 80s, interesting times.
Yeah.
If anybody from the Midlands or Athlone will know, like Willow Park is where I grew up. So it was nice place to grow up, but it got a bit rough then, as the years went on.
Would it be like a local authority kind of an area?
No, it did become one. Like when we moved in, it was grand. It was nice, semi-D houses, and but there was a college across the road, so a lot of student houses, and then it's sort of like they built some local authority houses out the back. So it's kind of it's fairly like I brought my kids in to visit it. A few years ago, and we basically were, when you're in the housing estate, you're trying to drive it, 5 or 6 or 7 kilometers an hour. Some blacked out windowed BMW passed us out on the road. Welcome back to Willow Park,
I know, but every area has that one estate, don't they? I remember I was in a treatment with these lads from Clonmel, and they used to talk to me about Stag Park, I think it was called. And then there's there's one of those estates in the north side as well, and Ballybeg and Waterford, and all, there's all kind of like there's even in kind of rough areas, even the people that live in rough areas, there's even an estate within that rough area that's fucking rougher than everybody else.
Oh yeah. You feel kind of posh. Like we lived in the posh area up the front, and then as you went further into the estate, it just kind of got worse, But no, there's great estates in Athlone, Battery Heights, Sarsfields, St. Mel's, I think, has been knocked down now beside the football ground there. But Athlone was an interesting place to grow up, But usual sort of like, I went to school with the brothers, and 80s Ireland kind of. You kind of look back and it feels dark. Like the play I wrote, Pure Mental, is about going back to that time and revisiting it, and sort of dealing with traumas and childhood. Things that happened in your childhood that you kind of thought were normal, or and were normal in a lot of cases.
What kind of things?
Well, like if you think about, if someone says domestic violence, you'll always think about husband and wife on husband. But domestic violence for me is like parent on child, and I would have grown up in a house where violence was used all the time by way of punishment or whatever, whatever. It was dependent on the mood of the person. And I would say, I talk about it in the play, and I'd say my mother probably wasn't well, and so you're kind of growing up in a house where there's physical violence, and you're kind of like trying to mind yourself. You're trying to, disassociate, or trying to, figure that all out. Or
you're on eggshells all the time.
You're on eggshells, and you're also trying to regulate your own emotions, so you don't spook the horses, or you keep your head down and all that kind of stuff, and that becomes part of your makeup then. And then you're going into school, and like the brothers then are doing the same, so
there's no getting away from it.
But you're looking to the adults to sort of show you the way and educate you and bring you up and show you that, and you're kind of everywhere you go, your teacher, your parents, you're being met with violence, something you don't like. You know, it's an odd it's an odd way to grow up. You know,
And even like that must have been the 70s, like the 80s and 70s, like growing up. And even before that, you know, what I was thinking of is when you were explaining it, being in a school with the brothers back then. Like today, the difference inside. I was inside in a school today, and they have a sensory room. They have a room where the first years have their little. There's a few coaches in the room, a little kitchen, and they all sit down and they have their lunch away from the rest of the school. And I went in there, and it was my school growing up as well, and I was just completely bewildered. I couldn't I really genuinely could not believe the transformation. Like my old classroom, which would have been the science lab where I got thrown out, suspended for buzzing the Bunsen burner inside the room, was now the sensory room with a little kitchen and couches and stuff where the kids could go. The other room where my woodwork room was where all the first years would have their lunch and sit down in couches and have a chat and a discussion, and teachers would come in and talk to them. And I said, what a time to grow up, like. Back in the 80s, the 70s, like just for us alone, it was a really, really, we were just coming out of the real whipping and the ruler age where you get the lash. The 80s was, you know, but before that it must have been horrific, like, to be in school.
What was it like for you in school?
yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, I had some nice teachers, you know, early on, but then as you get older, you're meeting these big men, you know, that are angry and frustrated, and
What way were you academically and sporty?
I was good. I was good. Interested. Played football. Played the GA. Played hurling. I was good at doing my homework and all the kind of stuff. But it just kind of like I just lost interest after a while, you know. And that kind of, I was a class clown then, kind of, you know. So I'd get myself in trouble. But it was almost like you know, you have this thing of kids getting in trouble because the only attention they're going to get is negative. But they prefer the negative attention than no attention. Yeah. So you're just acting out all the time, and that was my thing, was just to act out all the time. And I probably had a lot more energy than other kids, which sort of subsequently found out why. But like, so I was probably quite a boisterous young lad, and trying to find places to put your energy when you're being told to sit down and be quiet, you know, all the time is kind of, it's weird. Like, you talk about the school now, like when I talk about being, you know, being brought up on my mother and the domestic violence and all that kind of stuff, and people like young lads or lads that grew up the same time as me would say, but sure, we all got that. We all got a slap never did me any harm kind of thing, you know. But that wasn't right.
I know.
And that led on to, you know, where we are now. Like, I talk about it because there are lads out there in their 40s and their 50s who are dealing with this anger and they don't know where to put it, and they can't access the it's hurt they feel let down, they feel sad, and they can't access that. All they know is anger. The only emotion they can access is anger, and you can see that in Ireland now coming out. It's anger because they can't access the hurt they feel, and they can't express it. They can't express their emotions, and that's the problem, you know?
And they actually don't even understand where that anger came from. And you just said it there. One of them, some lads will turn around, sure, a slap never did nothing for you. There's your reasons, you know, growing up in a violent environment as a young child and noticing that any form of conflict was dealt with violence. You know, I grew up in a similar home, and all conflict, there was no discussions around the table. There was nothing like that. There was no one pulling you to the side and saying, listen, that kind of behaviour is not right. You know, we don't do that in this house. No. It was violence, and that's the way we carried on then, myself and my brothers, in our own lives. We understood that if you needed something in life, use violence and you will get it. Or if someone done something to you in life, use violence again and it'll make you feel better. We never understood that you could have a conversation with someone and be assertive, but these are things we learned later on in life. But going back to your point and what you were made, there's so many men walking around now, but they're not educated in the reason why they feel like that. You know, they feel the anger. This stuff happened as a young child, but the gap in between is the lack of education. They don't understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, and my thing is, I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. I'm not pointing the finger at my mother. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not pointing the finger at the brothers even, because they had their own hardship. They had their own things to deal with, their own... I'm sure stuff happened to my mother. I'm sure stuff happened to... Like, could you imagine being like 14, 15 and joining the brothers, you know?
Yeah.
Like, no one's pointing the finger, but if we don't talk about it, then we don't get any better. If we pretend, or we think it's okay and it should be okay and we should just learn to live with it and shut up and stop going on about it, then we don't learn from it. But we have to be vulnerable. We have to express ourselves. We have to talk about it, because that's how you heal. And talking is, which I learned a few years ago with therapy, talking is the greatest form of healing you can get, and expressing yourself. Because you express yourself and you talk about the things that happen to you, and you talk about your experience as a young person, it comes out, and you stop carrying it around in your head, and it's out in front of you, and it's out, and you're sharing with somebody else, and it's not as heavy in your head, it's gone. And that allows you to, that lifts the burden and the weight that's holding down the other emotions. And then you're sort of suddenly able to go, actually, you know what, I feel like I might cry now, I feel like I might, and then you're laughing at things, and you're not getting angry with people, and you're not getting frustrated, and you're not, you know, mouthing at the lad in the other car when you're stuck in traffic or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's all related, you know.
And it's even you made a great point there around thinking about stuff. So if you're thinking about something that happened and there's a memory attached to it, which then there may be an emotion, and if you start talking about it, the emotion is up. And if you feel that emotion in your body while you're talking about it, you're releasing the strength of the energy that's trapped within your body. And that's why it's very important to talk about this stuff instead of bottling it down here and being consumed with fear that you think you're going to be judged if you don't talk about it. You know, it's very important to talk about this stuff with the right person, obviously, which may be a counsellor or someone you really, really trust. But talk about it.
But you'd be amazed the amount of people, because I talk about this stuff openly, and then people get in touch with me. You'd be amazed the amount of people who are in marriages, or, you know, they've partners that they've never told, like, not their darkest secrets, but, you know, secret things that they hold on to themselves, and they're not even talking openly and honestly with their person that they're closest to and they've lived with for like 20 years, which is amazing. And like, that's the greatest thing you can do, is have open conversations with the person that you love, you know. It's
one of the guests we had on, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, in his book The Body Keeps the Score, he's a leading expert on post-traumatic stress disorder, and he did his research on Vietnam vets, and he said post-traumatic stress disorder, it's not what happened to them, it's what happened inside them when the event occurred. So for one person, it might be getting a clip around the ear in school on a daily. That might be get on with his life. But for the next person, he might be a bit more sensitive or different personality. That clip around the ear could be really traumatizing for him. So it's what's going on inside you when the event happens. And he also says something what you were talking about there, about kind of creating all the attention in school, even though it was all negative. And he said sometimes very traumatized people, they feel so disconnected and so numb that they create or seek out drama. That's the only time they feel alive. Because if they don't have the drama, what have the emptiness and their own thoughts, so they create all these events. It's kind of like what you were doing.
Yeah, because it's boredom or whatever, you know. You feel like it's too quiet here, you know.
So, do you know, what we all know with kind of adverse childhood experiences, if you have experienced the stuff that you're talking about, you know, you're more likely to end up in the services later on. And experimenting can become problematic. What was the teenage years for you like? Did you drinking, or how did that work out for you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty good. Like, I mean, I think my way of dealing with things was to be kind of ended up being just to be very good and not to be a problem for anybody, and to do kind of what, and you know, I mean, it was sort of like, it was a difficult sort of juxtaposition between wanting to like kind of rage against whatever, but
and not disturb your mum,
but also not disturb anybody, and not be bold, and not like get told off in school or getting, you know, you just want to be out in society being like a good man and like doing all the right things. So I didn't drink till kind of late, but once I did, then it was kind of like it was good medication for how I was feeling. It was balm, you know. So I mean, I started drinking probably 17, 18, and then I took to it quite well, you know. So there was drinking, and then like recreational stuff like smoking and hash and stuff kind of would have been a big thing.
Were you shy?
I was an introvert, yeah, I suppose. Like I was, and I suppose drinking just took me out of that. And I, you know, I was able to express myself. I mean, look, when I was with my friends, there was a certain. I feel like I copied people, you know.
Yeah, fitting in.
So I was fitting in. So I'd reflect back if someone came into a room, like, and I was in a room, and I'd reflect back what I thought that person wanted me to be. And I've been doing that up until very recently, until I figured out I was doing it, you know. So I was never so I'm still in the process of figuring out who I really am as a person and what I really want, because for so long I was just like it was great for radio, because you're just like trying to be this character on air and be the person you think the listeners might like, you know, which kind of works in a way, because you take on a character, you play a part, and that's it. But you know, it's much healthier for me to just be myself, and not to try and I'd be very sensitive to people's moods, so I'd pick that up. So if someone was in a bad mood, it wouldn't be like me trying to like cheer them up. I'd just like join them, you know, and be like, oh, geez, we're solemn now, are we? You know, if they're in a good mood, I'd be like, oh, I better, you know, I better join them in where they're at, you know. And that was kind of like, so it was very confusing. But yeah, drink was great, you know. And I never really, like, I mean, my 20s were kind of, you know, my 20s were for, like, I genuinely felt like I wanted to sort of travel. I wanted to drink. I wanted to, like, I would have been reading books about Jim Morrison or reading books about Jimi Hendrix and thinking that's cool, isn't it? Taking drugs and drinking and just being a kind of a bohemian sort of, you know, and you know, my 20s I traveled around the world and lived in London for a while and lived in Dublin, and, you know, did, you know, there was the, you know, the rave scene and all that kind of stuff, you know, and at one point I actually had to leave Dublin because I couldn't stay with the people I was with anymore, so I just we moved to London for
That was a mad time.
yeah.
I'm fucking laughing away to myself in my head.
But yeah, we moved to London in 98, 99.
Did you ever go to Sir Henry's back around that time?
Never got down to Sir Henry's, but it was more sort of like there was a place called the Pod in Dublin that we went to a lot every weekend, you know, and then that just became, it was every Saturday night, and it was like that's what you did, that was your ritual, you know.
Yeah.
And then it kind of became every Friday night as well, and then it became Sundays, and then you weren't going into work, and then you're like, you know, and it's like, okay, I just need to get out of here. And the only way I could see of getting out of here was like, I need to just cut all ties, leave, and just go, and you know, and I'm kind of good like that in a way that, like, because I gave up drinking about 3 years ago, like, and I've run marathons, or I've done this, or I've given myself goals and tasks, and that's kind of what makes life interesting for me. Is like, oh, how can I push myself? How far can I go on this? What can I do with this? And like when I make a decision, I'm like, okay, I need to leave this scene. I'm gone. And then we went to London and we saved up, and then we went traveling, you know. So that was kind of like, I'm good at a challenge, but also like I enjoyed that feeling of just being like, just letting myself explore the world. And I think, you know, I probably learned a lot from my experience, because I never quite ended up in trouble. You know, I was doing it in a kind of a, you know, there's like, it's interesting how people talk about drugs, but yet, you know, if you live in D4 and you're going to a house party, and it's different, isn't it?
It's acceptable then, you see.
Do you know what I mean? So I was probably just very lucky in what I was doing and who I was doing it with, and where, and my upbringing.
We did a podcast here with The Witness. Do you know the Nicola Talent podcast? She wrote a book with The Witness. But he spoke to us here about being a child and having to courier drugs and deliver drugs to huge houses in Dublin, you know, with big gates, and passing the heroin and the crack and the cocaine in the door, you know. So there's no real acceptable drug, because that drug has to get to you through a lot of abuse, neglect and violence. When did you start working in the media then?
So yeah, so after I came back from travelling, myself and a mate, Joe, we were sort of, I mean, I was always interested. I'd studied acting in my 20s, so I'd gone to college and studied acting, and somehow managed to finish that course. And I didn't have the belief I needed to sort of take that. Like, I went to about 3 or 4 auditions, and I was, oh, it's not for me. I didn't get any of these auditions, you know, not knowing that you have to go for hundreds of auditions before you get an acting job. And I was just starting out, but I kind of gave up on that. But so when I came back from traveling, I felt, okay, like, I'm going to have a crack at this. And part of what we'd studied in school was writing, and I started writing kind of comedy characters. So I was into watching shows like The Fast Show, or I don't know if you remember Vic and Bob, or Reeves and Mortimer, these kind of like comedy sketch shows. Harry Enfield, I suppose, kind of, you know, so comedy characters. So myself and Joe, he'd studied film, and I was I'd done a bit of writing, so we were trying to write these comedy characters. And the best way for us to get these comedy characters somewhere broadcastable, we didn't have money, so we couldn't film them. We didn't know anybody in television, so we, you know, it's not like we could just go into RT and say we've got an idea for some characters for a TV show. Radio was the most accessible, so we went to a community radio station in the north side called Near FM, and we did a course there with them for 6 months, and they gave us a show every Thursday night where we went in and we wrote these comedy sketches and performed them live on the mic, like we were like holding the script and, like, you know, doing the voices. And like one of the sketches was called Air Finglas, which was an airline based in Finglas. And like the characters were called, like, there was a chap called Elvis because he had a quiff, and there was a chap called Anto, and there's a lady called Tiffany Kiley, and they all worked in this little airline that was ran out of the back of a house in Finglas. So that was the kind of stuff we were doing, you know. But the comedy stuff got us onto Spin when that started. So the first youth regional station was Spin, and we used to do a show every Saturday there, and we do sketches, play tunes, and a bit of presenting. And then we got the breakfast show, and then over the years the presenting became more than the comedy bits, and I kind of dropped the comedy stuff then, which I kind of regret, but just that's the way it was. And then I ultimately ended up on the breakfast show on 2FM as a presenter, you know, and still wrote a little bit because I was with Bernard O'Shea, the comedian, and Jen, and we kind of wrote sketches as well and had characters, so there was a bit of element of that as well, you know.
The Republic of Telly, that was a very good one.
Yeah,
did you have any output on that?
Did I have any? I did record a couple of sketches for it, but then I don't think they made it to air, you know.
It was actually good while it lasted, you know. It was what's it like hosting the breakfast show and being on 2FM? Like, what kind of an audience have you got? Like, it's a big show, you know. Is there pressure comes with that? Does any of the stuff you had in your childhood ever interfere with that, or like, do you have to kind of keep on top of that stuff?
Well, I mean, because there's the imposter syndrome, isn't there? Like, I mean, I just didn't believe that this person was asking me to do this show. And I was asked to do the breakfast show. Someone rang me and said, would you be interested? You know, I was working on another radio station, and they said, would you be interested? And I was like, really? You sure? You know? And because I'd worked with Bernard O'Shea before, this guy was bringing Bernard O'Shea, and he was bringing Jen in. And they'd been on the Republic of Telly, and then they wanted someone to sort of host it and run the desk, and, you know, be the sort of the straight man to them, I suppose. And I was like, yeah, okay. I couldn't say no, obviously. But yeah, there's a lot of imposter syndrome. I was like, yeah, I'll probably get found out now pretty soon, you know, because I'd felt like I'd been kind of just winging it anyway. So even though I'd been in radio for well over 10 years at that stage, more. I still felt like I was winging it. I was getting away with it.
Well, don't we all feel like we're winging it? We often feel like we're winging it. We're on the Late Late Show with Ryan, and they say, "Oh, you're great presenters in a week." And we were in the Justice Media Awards, the Law Society of Ireland, very prestigious, and they were saying great piece of journalism. I was looking at him. He said, "Great, was it?" We got an award up there, ahead of it. Like, we were the only non-commercial entity in the room. Like, it was amazing. But like, it was imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, yeah.
But
I suppose you wing it until you make it, don't you?
Well, I mean, you
I'd say Michael D is up in the hour. I'm going, fuck, am I? Somebody's going to fucking find me out here one of the days.
It's funny because I'm listening to, like, Bono. If anybody thinks of Bono, you just think of, you know, a massive ego or whatever. Same thing, you know. And he says, my ego protects me, you know.
I was inside and work the other day, and I was just kind of looking at my own life, and I was just thinking to myself, I said, how in the name of God did I get here? How did I get to where I am today? Like, you know,
like a dream.
I'm a guy that was never on social media in my life, ever. And then we went to just go automatically from something like that. But you know, the way we always look at other people who are in the media and films, and we look at them and we think, what does it actually take for somebody to get to where they are?
Yeah.
And you know what? It just happens automatically. It doesn't take anything. It's just a lot of hard work, obviously.
Yeah. Doesn't happen automatically.
I
don't think it happens.
You know?
When I look at people that's successful in the media, before I started doing this, I would think, fuck it, they have a grand cushy number there, haven't they? But now that we're in it and we're trying to make it, it's very hard to make it to a stage where you do have a cushy number. Like, there's a lot of, like, 10 years you were in it before you got that big break, you know? And it was duty, and you worked hard for it. But people don't just fall into the good jobs in the media. They do a lot of groundwork.
You know what the breaker is? And it just came to me. Fear. If you don't overstep that bit of fear that you have around radio, comedy, film, singing, acting, it doesn't matter. If you don't take that first step and every other step after that, you're going to feel fear for every step. You're just going to live a normal life. But if you face the fear and you go with it, that's how you kind of climb as well, isn't it?
Yeah, do you want the fear to own you, or do you want to sort of like, even though you might be anxious and you might be fearful, but at least you're trying, you know what I mean? At least you're giving it a go, and that's all. But I'd imagine you guys probably did a lot of talking, a few years ago, and did a lot of counselling, did a lot of therapy and all that kind of stuff. And I definitely think that helps you, because I mean, like if I look at the 20 years of my working in radio, that's great. And for any outsider, you're thinking, geez, that's a great achievement. But I actually only feel like I'm starting to live now.
Yeah.
That I'm away from that.
Yeah.
That I'm just, that I went to therapy, and now I know who I am, and I dealt with my demons, and do you know what I mean? Like I only feel like I'm starting now. I'm almost like, I'm nearly 50 now. I need more time, you know?
Do you feel that within your life, you've fulfilled your purpose here? Or is it something that you're still kind of searching for?
Yeah, I feel like I'm getting there. I feel like I'm figuring it out. Like I would have, like even in my radio career, I would have just, you do what you're told. You sort of don't try and, rock the boat, whatever. Whereas now, if I'm on social media, I'm calling out the lads who are, who are trying to kick poor defenseless people from the Ukraine out of their hotels, whatever. I'm saying things that are angering other people, and I feel very good about that. So I'm using my platform to try and show the other side, so the fascists or the right wings organizations don't win, because they seem to be the loudest at the moment. So it's trying to, how can I use my platform to say good things? So I do think that in a way I haven't fulfilled, like I've my wife and my children, like even that side I have, like I feel very proud of all that. But, being an influential person, I definitely like to sort of step into that role more, talking about mental health, talking about therapy, trying to help other men.
Isn't there a bit of responsibility when we have platforms and privilege of education and opportunities to speak out on behalf of those that don't? And I know relatively recently you were diagnosed with ADHD and autism.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that, and what was the lead up to that, why you went for the assessments? And
yeah, like that was that kind of answered a lot of questions, really. And when I got the ADHD and the autism, like autism I still don't really understand, so I can
it's such a huge spectrum, isn't it?
Yeah, but sometimes ADHD and autism can go hand in hand and then come together. And obviously I was either high functioning, or I'd figured out ways of dealing with it, or appearing, or just as I said earlier, like just doing what other people did, copying in social situations, copying what other people did, behaving how other people were behaving. And I learned, how to behave, and I learned how to hold on to myself and how to carry myself and all that. I'm still looking into the autism side of things, but the ADHD thing, it's, if you've got ADHD, you don't make enough dopamine, so it's very hard to focus on something, and that's where procrastination comes in. That's where not getting your work done comes in. That's where not getting your schoolwork, homework, studying for exams, all that kind of stuff. That's lack of focus, because if you don't get dopamine from something, you've no interest in it. Yeah. Your brain is saying, look for the dopamine. Where's the dopamine? The dopamine is in the pub, or the dopamine is in the nightclub, or the dopamine is on your phone, or the dopamine is in the shop, or it's not here at the, in your books that you're supposed to be learning, so that's what you're dealing with all the time, is the pull of the dopamine, and that's very strong because you don't have enough. Most people do have enough, and that's where the focus is. That's where it comes from. But so that explained a lot, and it meant to me that I wasn't stupid. I just couldn't focus on certain things, which is a huge relief. So now I'm like, okay, now I can. I learned stuff, and I'm not thick, or I'm not like I read books, but I found it very hard. Like it was hard work to do certain things. So that was great, and it sort of explained a lot about my childhood. It explained a lot about who I was growing up. It explained a lot about my personality, and then the ASD side of things. The one thing I do know about that is this chronic anxiety. So a lot of people who have autism, there's a chronic anxiety that comes with that. And I didn't realize that I had this chronic anxiety all the time. I thought everybody felt like this all the time. But when I realized that not everybody felt like that all the time, I was like, oh, right, okay. Because what I would do is I would think that, right, the reason I'm nervous on the radio today is because I'm shit at being on the radio. and I'm going to have to really fucking knock it out of the park to convince everybody that I'm not shit and I'm not nervous.
Yeah.
So I used to think that
You internalized it, made it about it like a pathology. You know, that it was something that bad about you.
I attached the anxiety to things. I'm anxious because of this. I'm anxious because of that. I'm anxious because of the drink. I'm anxious because I'm on the radio all the time and I'm not any good in it and I have to work really hard. Unlike other people like Bernard O'Shea, who's a natural, he's naturally funny. I have to work really hard all the time to keep up with those people because I'm shit and it's harder for me to do that. So I was associating it. So for somebody to say to me, you have this anxiety, it's all the time. It doesn't matter whether there was a lion chasing you down the road. Actually, you'd probably deal with that better than most people because you're used to that level of anxiety. You're at a 9 all the time. So if you ever go to a 10, you lose the head. Whereas most people are at a 1 and it takes a lot for them to get up to an 8 or a 7. You're just up there all the time. I'm like, oh, geez, that explains a lot. Like I remember going for acupuncture and the lady was like putting these pins in my head and they were like popping out. And she was like, are you stressed?
Very tense.
Are you stressed? Do you suffer from stress? I went, no, not stress. I didn't even know what stress was. Like, grand. But it was like,
you were living in that state of being
all your life. Like that all the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't know I was stressed or anxious. Couldn't sleep properly. It's the other thing, if you're not creating dopamine during the day, you don't sleep properly because that's important for your sleep.
Do you know, I looked at a great example of the two different types of brains, someone with ADHD and someone without. And it's like, say for example, the assignments I have to do at the moment, I procrastinate massively. I was 6 weeks late overdue on my assignment because I literally could not get myself onto the chair, and to start these I was so stressed and anxious over it. And for people, normal people, when they have to do something and there's a deadline, they can sit down and they can stimulate it, the dopamine can click and it'll go. But for people with ADHD, it just won't, it will not. There's no stimulation. Any task that they believe is too difficult, there is no stimulation from it, and they will not do it until, this is the key, until it becomes like somebody has a gun up to the side of your head and you have to do it now, you know. And that's when you get things done. It's like everything is left to the last minute, 5 minutes before it has to be done, and you know you have to do it now. So it's like, oh, and it's breaking your heart to do it. And that's how it feels for me too. It feels like, right, I will leave it to the last second because I cannot and I don't want to do this thing because it does absolutely nothing for me. Nothing.
Get nothing from it.
You know, until it's like, right, I'm 6 weeks overdue now. The people inside in the Access Centre and UCC are saying to me, we think you should cancel the course because we don't think you're going to be able to continue because you're not able for it. And then my head was saying, you know what, no, I'll get this done. And I said I'll have it in before the Christmas. I actually had to take 2 weeks off of work to do it, the assignment. And every time I had to go into the office, into the shed to do the assignment, I would pick the phone up and text someone or ring them, ask them to go for coffee or take on something else. After setting it 2 weeks aside to do these, I was like I was running from it constantly.
But the only time you'll do that then is when you have the rush of doing it at the last minute, and it has to be like that's a rush. Then you're like, oh, then you're focused, then you're on it. And the good thing about people with ADHD, because it's not all negative, is that we are very good in crisis situations. We are very good at figuring stuff out when the shit hits the fan. We are very good at turning it on. So like you'll get someone in a work situation who's really good at planning. You know, here's the 6 weeks of the plan. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do this, and this. Like, so I work in PR, so you might have a PR activation. You've got your celebrity coming on this day. You've got to take these photographs. This, you're going to meet the press. Then and that's the plan. But if anything goes wrong, this planner will freak out. Like, oh Jesus, this hasn't gone to plan. Whereas the ADHD person won't make the plan, but when the shit hits the fan, they'll step in and come up with a solution. So they're valuable people to have in the workplace, you know.
Do you know when you got the diagnosis, what do you do with that information then? Do you go, are you taking medication? I don't know if you're open about talking about that, or do you do supports like counselling or coaches, or what do you do?
So I'll tell you what, it was when I left 2FM, I started with a therapist, guy called Luke. And like Luke, and going to therapy was a game changer for me anyway, right? So this is before 3 years before I got an ADHD diagnosis. But it just going to talk therapy opened my mind to things, the possibility of things. So I was being honest about things. I was able to talk to my wife about things. I was able to be honest with her. I was able to be vulnerable. I was able, so I was dealing with my emotions. I was dealing with my childhood traumas, all that kind of stuff. So I'd done a lot of the work. So it was when we were looking at my son in school and he wasn't, I would have probably been the dad who would have been you just need to knuckle down. You just need to get your shit together and you just need to do the homework. That's what I would have been like. But my wife was convinced there was something going on. So we sort of went on the journey with my son to figure out what was going on with him and schoolwork and why he didn't want to go into school and what was wrong with him and all that kind of stuff. So that was the journey for him to get the ADHD diagnosis. Now, I can remember my wife saying, I think there's something. I was, will you shut up? He's grand, and being very dismissive.
Yeah.
But because of therapy, I had a different mindset. So I was like, okay, well, let's see. I was talking to him. I was trying to sympathize with him. I was trying to figure out, I was with him on the journey. And then, so like I was with him on the journey and then my wife was with him on the journey. So we were answering questions about Finn and he's this and he's that and does he do this and all that. And my wife was answering the question going, yeah, and that's also Keith as well. So she recognized that I was the same as him. So we got Finn's diagnosis, and then straight away she said, right, you're next.
Couldn't get two for the price of one.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah,
because they are expensive.
They're expensive, I know.
Yeah.
But she had me diagnosed well before the psychiatrist did. And, I was talking on the phone today, and we were like, Finn was sent to us.
Yeah.
He was sent to us because life is so much better now, because I'm not frustrated with not being able to do things. I'm not angry. The therapy was great, the meditation, I did all the things,
Yeah.
Vitamins, eating properly, going to the gym. I did it all. And I went to this psychiatrist and at the end of the consultation, he said, now you found what you were looking for.
And then there's another journey starts, which is the medication.
Yeah.
And it's not something that they give you the one pill to fit all shoes for. It's nothing like that. There's a process on it. You have to find the right dosage, the right medication, and there is, in society, people look at medication for ADHD as something that, oh, no. But in reality, in your own view of what it's done for you, has the medication helped?
Yeah, so I started taking medication before Christmas. I'll tell you, so I wrote a play called Pure Mental, which is about my... basically what happened.
Is it a one-man show?
It's a one-man show, yeah. Breakfast show finished up in 2FM. I felt like shit. Obviously, the imposter syndrome, I was like, I was right.
Yeah.
I am shit at this job, and now it's coming back, So the play is about that and my life after that, going to therapy, getting sorted out and, figuring all that. So I wrote that play and I toured it before last Christmas in 2022. It's hard to remember what year. 2021. And then in 2023, in January, just a few weeks ago, we remounted it in Newbridge. So, when I did the tour around Ireland with Pure Mental a year ago, on 2 occasions I had a panic attack on stage as I was doing the show. I found it very difficult to learn the lines, right? Janet, who directed my play, was she was sent from God because she had the patience of a saint. I was frustrated. I just kept I didn't want to burden her with it, but in my head I was like, you're shit at this. What are you doing this for? This is ridiculous. What are you putting this poor woman through, making her direct you in this play? What are you on it? What are you doing? What's going on here? Just give it up. But I managed to learn the lines, at the last minute. And I managed to get through it, but I had panic attacks. And at one stage thankfully I knew the lines inside out, upside down, back to front. So I had a panic attack on stage. One half of my brain was saying, get off the stage, you're in danger here. The other half of my brain was doing the play. And this continued, and I was like, oh my God. And I knew in that moment, if I left the stage, I'd never ever go back on a stage again. Yeah. I couldn't give into it. So there's a will there. There's something in me that has a will that even as anxious as I felt, I went on the radio. I'm on the stage having a panic attack, but I won't give into it, So there's something inbuilt into me, and maybe that's something my parents instilled in me or something, because parents have bad and good sides. But when I did that play in January, I'd been to the psychiatrist. He'd given me my medication, which is Concerta, which is, it's kind of like caffeine, I suppose. It allows you to focus. It clears your head. You know, you're not going 90 miles an hour. You have to sit down and you get your work done. And it's not like it's not dopamine, but you get your work done and you create your own dopamine. So learning the lines, I was up every morning during Christmas. Like Christmas morning, I got up early before everybody else. Stephen's Day, got up early before everyone else, sat in the sitting room learning my lines, loved it. Like it was like a different play. I was like a different person. I got up and performed it 2 nights in Newbridge, loved it. No anxiety, just loved the experience. And it was a totally different experience, you know, because I performed it. I was in it. I was enjoying it. I was able to, like, I wasn't doing it out in panic, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like the way I'd performed it before was like, I need to get this play out. I need to make sure no one thinks I'm panicking here. I want to make sure that people think I'm relaxed, even though I'm not. So there's all that going on. Like, so in one way, I was an amazing actor, but it probably looked a bit stilted. But this time around, with the medication, I take serotonin for the anxiety. I take Concerta for my focus. And I absolutely loved it. It was the greatest experience. Like,
It's changed your life, Keith.
Yeah, because I was like, I would often ask myself, why are you putting yourself in these situations? Why are you writing a play? Why are you on stage? This is horrible for you. I'd have nightmares about it. I wouldn't be able to sleep in the days before it or after. Like, there was no reason for me to put myself through that. Like, you know, you'd be kind of going, just a quiet life.
Yeah.
You know, working in a shop or something.
Yeah.
I know I'd be thinking,
like, why are you doing this to yourself? And I don't know. I don't know where that came from. But obviously, once I figured out the ADHD and the autism, I was able to enjoy the things. Obviously, I'm like, yeah, I like this. This is great. I love it. And I could sleep without worrying about it the next day. I knew tomorrow would look after itself. Whereas before, I'd be like, I couldn't sleep. I like most Sunday nights, I didn't sleep because I was doing the breakfast show on a Monday morning. You know.
And it's very important, right? And just for some people that may think that, is it about labeling yourself as somebody's, I don't know, with ADHD or, you know, it's actually not, right? It's not about labeling yourself. What it actually is about understanding how you work as a human being and figuring it out and understanding why you behaved in certain ways in the past and why you weren't able to do this and working on it.
Yeah.
Working on it. There's no better, like when I found out I was dyslexic, in third level education, when that psychologist told me across the table, she says, yeah, Timmy, you're dyslexic, it was like, whoa, jeez, for the last 36 years I thought I was a tick hunt. I thought I was stupid.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden this explains everything, because I was after doing a bit of research on people who are dyslexia, you know, and it just all made sense. And all that core belief that I had, that I was stupid, no good, just a tick fucker, you know?
Yeah.
Just started to slowly dissipate. And it's gone. And then I started to get more confidence in myself, you know? And then I started working my strengths instead of my weaknesses around education, you know? So
I got answers, like.
Exactly.
I got answers.
I mean? Yeah.
You know, when you were talking there, it reminded me of, you know, like when you're backstage going on the Tommy Turner show or the Late Late show or the Claiborne, or when we're about to come out in the Opera House, it's like, how the fuck did I always put myself in these situations where you're full of fucking fear and anxiety? But afterwards, then you're after getting over it. It's after going well, and that's the best feeling ever.
It's the buzz afterwards, yeah.
I literally couldn't even talk. Like, it's like, I don't even know how words came out of my mouth. Literally, like.
When we were backstage in the Opera House, Timmy was like trying to psych us up, you know. The big handy nearly broke my back. Then he's pure rough, like. Have you any plans on bringing the show to Cork?
Hopefully. I came during lockdown to the Everyman, and sure nobody was coming to see plays. So it was bad, yeah. So hopefully we'll do it again. I'm kind of like, look, the play is there. You know, if anybody's interested in bringing it to the local theatre, give me a shout, and you know, they can follow me on social media and get in touch that way. But I've been talking to people about bringing it. There's a show in Bray in May, and I want to do like arts festivals around the country during the summer, and I'd like to bring it to prisons as well.
Might be able to help you with that.
Oh, great. Yeah. So there's like a version I can do, which is like bells and whistles, music, sound effects, backdrop, projection, shiny floor, you know, big light at the front, and but I can do it totally stripped back, which is I just need a chair, really, you know. So yeah, I'm really hoping to kind of, it's just, look, there's nothing really if you look at that play, it's a one-man show. I just talk about my experience growing up, and I talk about, you know, how I felt when I lost. Like a lot of men in their 40s, they lose something they love, like a loved one or a job or something, and it can really take you down. And I think if you don't deal with it, it will take you down. And the best thing I ever did was going to therapy to talk about it, and it kind of kept me just in the right place, so I was able to kick on from there, so I didn't go down.
Yeah.
So it's that journey. I go back to the 80s. I talk about my childhood. I talk about school, things that happened, people that died when in the 80s. When I was young, lots of young people seemed to be dying. I don't know if that was a thing. But anyway, so talking about all those things, all those fears, all those ghosts that I carried around in my head, and just getting that all out there. And it's therapeutic for me. There's nothing wildly crazy that happens. It's kind of an everyman story. Like, you'd look at that and go, yeah. Like, but it's, for me, other men to see a man saying, this is all that happened to me. Like, it's nothing crazy, you know. I didn't shoot anybody, or I didn't, like, but even in that, I still had to deal with it to get to a point where I didn't, you know, when the shit hit the fan, I was able to go to, when I went to therapy, I was able to deal with what was going on. Do you know what I mean? You have to deal with your shit, or your shit will deal with you. Yeah. And that's all it's about. But so I want to try and get it out there and get people, get men especially, to see it, you know.
Yeah. Before we finish,
I was just going to talk. You're big into sport as well, so I was just going to say that you do a bit of football, and you do a bit of running as well, just to kind of help you around your own mental.
Well, you see, that's the thing. Like, you can get an ADHD diagnosis, but you still have to exercise, you still have to eat properly, you still have to get, you know, your sleep will improve because of the dopamine. But yeah, I went back to playing football. I love playing football. I always loved playing football when I was young. And that's another thing. Like, remember the things you loved doing as a kid and start doing them again. And don't feel like you can't do them because you're an adult, because that's when we were all at our happiest. No matter what shit we went through, we were all at our happiest on the green outside, whatever we were doing, whether it was like digging a hole or playing football with our friends. Like, that was that's when you were getting your dopamine, because it was the camaraderie in the football. And I love playing football. There's a few groups that I play with. I'm on the WhatsApp group, and I'll go down to Monday night, Wednesday night. It's just 5-a-side or 8-a-side or whatever, and I love it. And I walk and I cycle and I try and build my exercise into my day. But yeah, all those things like exercise, eating well, it's all still important to do. Like, it doesn't matter. The medication isn't going to fix it, you know. It'll just help you get your dopamine. That's it. But you have to look after everything else.
Exactly.
Athlone were at the pinnacle of football once
Oh
upon a
man,
time.
don't talk.
My uncle's friend played for Athlone Town against AC Milan in San Siro in the European Cup. He did.
Yeah, and they came
Athlone
back.
were the big thing.
Yeah.
They're the oldest club in Ireland.
Yeah.
They aren't they?
Yeah, AC Milan came back to Athlone and played them in Mel's, and there's a great picture of the AC Milan lads getting off the bus, and like St Mel's is a back road, like it's potholes and mud, and they're like getting off there with their flares and their pointy leather Italian shoes, and their Macs and all, like getting off this like fancy 1970s bus in Athlone and stepping in the puddles and
the glory days.
Oh, the glory days. And who's your friend that played?
Ask me afterwards.
All right,
I can't think of his name at the moment.
There was a great player that played for Athlone in the 80s, Larry Wise. And I always remember the graffiti on the wall as you walk down into the pitch, into St Mel's Park. They play in Lissy Woolen now, so St Mel's has been flattened. But there's a great bit of graffiti. It was Larry B. Wise. And I don't know, it's always stuck with me. And he was a great footballer. He was like, they were like the celebrities of Athlone of my day.
Before we finish, have you any recommended reading for people that might be listening and affected by some of the issues? Is there any books you went to get answers? Or
Yeah, ADHD 2.0 is the new version of the book ADHD, written by a couple of doctors who are experts in the field. So ADHD 2.0, absolutely brilliant. Like, even if you don't have ADHD, even if your child doesn't have ADHD, like, one of the things that's really good for a child with ADHD is our hugs and being told, and positive affirmations. So being told you love them consistently. So for myself and my wife with Finn, we're like, okay, we have to hug him every morning.
It gives the dopamine that they're lacking.
That's the dopamine. And you say, first thing in the morning, it's a hug, I love you, proud of you, bud, or whatever it is. Now he's getting a bit older, so it's harder. But but he'll still, your children will let you do that as long as you want to, you know. So even those little things, even if your child doesn't have ADHD, it's powerful.
Balancing exercises are very, very good as well.
Juggling, another thing.
Just standing on one foot, just balancing. It helps them to be more structured and organised, and I can't think of the word, but it's supposed to be very, very good as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I listened to that book on Blinkist.
Yeah.
15-minute book.
You didn't have time.
That's about I'm on. I can focus for the first 30 seconds. That's
the most ADHD thing ever. I listened to the book about ADHD in 15 minutes.
I know.
15 hours condensed into 15 minutes.
Oh,
It's a
Jesus.
pleasure talking to you,
Oh,
Keith.
lads, it's great to be here. Yeah.
Thanks for your time. I'm sure we'll
It's too
connect.
fast.
Yeah, I know. We connect down the line again, please,
I'll be
God.
back for part 2.
Not a bother. God bless.
Definitely, yeah. You definitely have to leave us know how we get on with it.
Cheers, lads.
Fair play, Keith.
Slán.